This video is my second video concerning incels. Today, I'll be discussing the life of 22-year-old Jake Davison and the police failings that allowed this horrific case to happen. Jake William Davison was born on August 22, 1998, in the English city of Plymouth, the youngest of three children of Maxine and Mark Davison, the latter a native of the Shetland Islands. Davison has two older siblings, Zoe and Josh. Maxine had previously lived in the Shetlands, where she met Mark Davison, a well-known thug and alcoholic on the island. Unfortunately, due to Mark's antisocial behaviour and ongoing struggles with alcoholism, the couple separated shortly after Maxine became pregnant with their third child. Mark, Zoe and Josh remained in the Shetland Islands, while Maxine relocated to Keam, a suburb of Plymouth northwest of the city centre. It was here where her youngest child, Jake, was born. Though the two were now living nearly 800 miles away, they would regularly visit the Shetlands, where they spent long periods. During this time, Davison's mother and grandparents became concerned about his behaviour. Although he was described as a very quiet child, he was also very quick-tempered and seemed to be developing anger issues. Maxine asked that her youngest son be assessed for learning difficulties. He was eventually diagnosed with autism and ADHD. After Davison turned 6, his mother was unsure whether to send him to a mainstream school or a special school. She eventually settled on Mount Tamar, a publicly funded school for children with special needs. A relatively small school with around 110 students, it was underfunded and so did not have the best reputation. Although one former teacher, Josephine Duffy, spoke fondly of him, those who attended school with Davison were not fond of him. He had a, quote, special interest in guns and had a large collection of spent ammunition, dating as far back as the American Civil War of 1861 to 65. He even gave an assembly on guns. Davison's anger issues continued to affect him. He punched a student and assaulted 2 teachers. Duffy, however, stated that she could not recall the attacks on the teachers, and stated that he punched the student after being, quote, provoked. Davison's autism meant that he struggled to interact with other students, and he ended up spending most of his time alone or visiting family in the Shetland Islands. Although Davison had anger issues and was naturally a quiet child, he was not necessarily a bad child. Neighbours described him as pleasant, and once a week he would help his mother with her shopping. In his teens, Davison turned to the internet for friendship and found that socializing online was much easier than in real life. He played video games and frequented online forums. By his late teens, Davison began to harbour a very negative outlook on life. He was particularly frustrated with his inability to get a girlfriend, despite wanting one. He became so fixated on losing his virginity that he began venting about this on his YouTube channel named Professor Waffle, blaming his mental barriers and physical appearance on his lack of success with women. From about the age of 17, Davison gradually became more obnoxious, and his warped views were pushing people away. In 2016, at the age of 18, he was cautioned by police after attacking a 25-year-old man and his pregnant girlfriend walking through his neighbourhood. The incident was completely unprovoked. Police were called, but due to the lack of evidence, police could not arrest Davison, and the incident was dropped. Police do not appear to have taken the victim's case seriously, and the attack was never put on Davison's record. The following year, in June 2017, Davison applied for a firearms license to own a shotgun. Having been frequenting gun forums on Reddit, he wanted a gun. The UK has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world, and to own a gun, the applicant must prove that they do not pose a threat to public safety, and have a very good reason for wanting one. Davison did not live or work in a particularly big city, nor did he live or work on a farm, so there was no real reason for him to own a shotgun. Despite this, his application was approved in 2018, meaning he could legally own a firearm, owning a pump-action shotgun. Through his late teens and early adulthood, Davison began to foster his own ideologies on life and he became increasingly loathing of his own mother, because she often disagreed with him. When Davison was young, his mother Maxine received financial support from the government to keep them housed, but now that Davison was over the age of 18, she was no longer entitled to that benefit. Davison was forced to find work, eventually securing a position as an apprentice crane operator at Babcock International. Outside of work, Davis continued to frequent online forums, venting about how much he hated his mother, though nobody really listened to him. He would also post videos on YouTube describing women as, quote, simple-minded, and claiming that they only cared about money and status. He had begun to hold a very misogynistic outlook, feeling that he deserved women but could not have them. He also feared that he was doomed to be, quote, forever alone, and therefore had no passion or drive in life. Davison spent ample amounts of time on gun forums on Reddit, the world's largest online public forum. He also frequented incel forums, where he could find sympathy from other users who had similar beliefs. I've touched on the incel movement before, in my video on arguably the most infamous incel, Elliot Rodger. The term incel is a contraction of involuntary celibate, or involuntarily celibate, and is used to denote sexually frustrated men who long for a romantic or sexual relationship but are unable to achieve one. Incels blame women for their lack of success, and sometimes have nihilistic views. They refer to handsome, popular and sexually active men as Chads, and popular and unattainable women as Stacys. Davison believed in the black pill ideology, a term used by incels meaning that unless they are physically attractive, no woman will ever want to date them. The solution to this problem is to either remain, quote, forever alone, or find solace in acts of violence. Davison regularly visited another forum, r/Doomer, a forum dedicated to those who believe that there is no point in trying in life, and that they have already failed. As you may have imagined, Davison began surrounding himself in an echo chamber of negativity, which ended up spilling into the real world. His online habits and nihilistic views made him an obnoxious and repellent person. As Davison's behaviour became increasingly disturbing, his family tried desperately to get support, particularly through the NHS's mental health services. Mark Davison, who had turned his life around after being released from prison, tried hard to get his son mental health support as early as 2017, but supply was overshadowed by demand. Fast forward 3 years, to 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic raged through the nation. As the NHS was overworked, understaffed and underfunded, the wait to see a psychologist or psychiatrist could take years, not helped by the social distancing measures in place during this time. Maxine Davison became so concerned with her son's behaviour that she called the police on her own son, asking that they undertake a welfare check on him. Unfortunately, these concerns were never addressed by police. Also in 2020, Davison got into a fight with 2 teenagers. Fortunately, police revoked his gun licence and pump-action shotgun. Police noticed that there were no previous offences on Davison's record, the 2016 assault having never been recorded. They agreed to return his gun licence if he took an anger management course. Naturally, Davison complied, and after completing this course in the spring of 2021, police returned his firearm in July that year. Unfortunately, this was an exceptionally naive decision by police that would have terrible consequences. On a warm but otherwise unremarkable evening of August the 21st, 2021, tensions were brewing in the Davison household. Jake Davison's Reddit account was temporarily suspended after he made inappropriate comments towards a 16-year-old American user. Having long felt that his life had no meaning, Davison's hatred of the general population was reaching its peak. He felt that he could take his frustrations out on one person in particular, someone who loved him more than anyone else: his mother. The day after his Reddit account was suspended, Davison picked an argument with his mother. Although we'll probably never know what triggered the argument, what we do know is that during the argument, Davison stormed into his room, picked up his shotgun, and marched out. He burst into his mother's room and shot her at point-blank range, striking her in the head and chest. She fell to the floor and died immediately. Despite realizing the severity of what he had just done, and knowing that his life would not be worth living if he had to face the consequences, Davison reloaded his gun and tucked to the cul-de-sac of Biddick Drive, where he lived with his mother. Walking outside, he set his eyes on a man across the road. The man was Lee Martin, and he was walking with his 3-year-old adopted daughter, Sophie. Davison marched towards the two, with Martin trying to shield his daughter. Davison fired at both, killing them. As he was walking down the cul-de-sac, Davison fired at Ben Parsonage and his mother Michelle. Thankfully, Davison did not kill them, and the mother and son were able to retreat to safety, though they were hit by the spread of bullets and were wounded. Davison then traversed through an alleyway before taking to a local park, where Stephen Washington was walking his 2 dogs. Davison shot him, with Washington falling to the ground before passing away. Emerging onto Royal Navy Avenue, Davison began shooting at random, not caring if people were in the way. Standing in the doorway of Blush hairdressing salon, 66-year-old Kate Shepherd was having a cigarette, unaware of the armed gunman on the loose. Davison targeted and shot her on sight, fatally wounding her. Not surprisingly, police were informed and on their way to the scenes of destruction. Davison, who by now would have been aware that the police were onto him, continued walking down the road and saw a shocked bystander. He told the man, quote, "There's nothing to worry about, mate." Being the coward that he was, and knowing he would never live as a free man again, he took the gun to his head, pulled the trigger, and took his own life. Police, tactical response teams, paramedics, and air ambulances arrived on the scene within minutes of receiving the first call. Davison was pronounced dead at the scene. The 6-minute attack had claimed the lives of 5 innocent people, only one of whom had any prior connection to Davison. On the night of August the 13th, 2021, the day after the horrific shootings, a candlelit vigil was held in North Down Crescent Park. All flags in the city of Plymouth were flown at half-mast, and Smeaton's tower was lit up as a mark of respect. People gathered to honour the memories of Maxine Davison, Lee Martin, Sophie Martin, Stephen Washington, and Kate Shepherd. Police knew immediately that this case would reflect badly on them. The case also saw changes in firearms laws in the UK. Officers must now investigate the social media profiles of all applicants, and the Home Office ordered all police forces in England and Wales to review their practices and review any existing firearms licences. In February 2023, following an inquest into the attacks, the families of Davison's victims accused Devon and Cornwall police of giving him, quote, "a licence to kill," after warning signs were ignored. They said there had been, quote, "breathtaking incompetence and systematic failures within every level of the firearms licensing unit of Devon and Cornwall Police." The Independent Office for Police Conduct, or IOPC, made a series of recommendations to Devon and Cornwall Police and to the Home Office for forces across the UK in an attempt to, quote, "strengthen firearms licensing controls following the brutal attacks." None of the officers involved with Davison were dismissed from the force. The IOPC reported that one Devon and Cornwall Police staff member received a written warning. An officer retired in 2021 and so could not face disciplinary proceedings, and there was no case to answer for the second officer. The report highlighted wider shortcomings in training and guidance in the force, rather than the fault of individuals. In the aftermath of the inquest, Chief Constable Will Kerr of Devon and Cornwall Police issued a statement, quote, "My thoughts and those of everyone within Devon and Cornwall Police remain with the families of those who died in and survived such tragic circumstances in August 2021. Devon and Cornwall Police has acknowledged that Jake Davison should never have been in possession of a shotgun licence. Steps should have been taken to safeguard our communities, and for that failure I am truly sorry." Since the attacks, Devon and Cornwall Police has invested £4 million in the firearms licensing unit, with 100 staff handling the highest number of any gun licence applications of any police force in England and Wales. Fortunately, due to the strict firearms laws in the United Kingdom, mass shootings are very rare, and while it is for the best that police are making changes to their practices to prevent anything like this happening again, it has come too late. There was no real reason for Jake Davison to have owned a gun, so why he was granted a firearms licence, particularly when he had a history of violence, an unhealthy obsession with guns, and mental health struggles, is anyone's guess. While gun control laws in the UK have strengthened since the attacks, the NHS is continuing to fail people with mental health needs. It can take months to be seen. If Davison had received the mental health treatment he so urgently needed, the attacks could have been prevented, and 5 innocent people, Maxine Davison, Lee Martin, Sophie Martin, Stephen Washington, and Kate Shepherd, would still be with us today.